About 15 minutes ago, I was in the production booth down the hall, editing together a segment on community prayer groups for tomorrow's morning show. The station's small, just me and Caleb Morgan on the overnight, and we've got this routine down pretty well. He handles the board, I do the talking, and we keep each other awake with bad coffee and worse jokes. Caleb's 26, got that youth group leader energy, always talking about his fiancée Hannah and their wedding plans for next spring. Good kid, real solid faith, the kind that makes you feel like maybe you're doing something right just by being around him. So I'm in there, headphones on, splicing audio, when the song ends in the main studio. I've got it timed perfectly because I've done this 1,000 times. The song was 3 minutes and 42 seconds, and I needed exactly 3 minutes and 20 seconds to finish the edit. But when I walk back into the studio, Caleb's gone. Just gone. His chair's still warm, his coffee cup is sitting there with steam coming off it, and his headphones are on the desk like he just set them down. The board's still running, the on-air light is still red, and we're broadcasting dead silence to however many insomniacs and truckers are listening out there in the dark. My first thought, I'm not gonna lie to you, was that he was playing some kind of prank. Caleb did that sometimes, hiding in the supply closet or something, waiting to jump out. So I checked the bathroom, checked the break room, even opened the supply closet. Nothing. I called his name a few times, feeling stupider each time because the building is maybe 1,500 square feet total and there's nowhere to hide. That's when I noticed his Bible was still on the desk, open to 1 Thessalonians, chapter 4. He'd been reading it during the last song break, I remembered that now. Verses 16 and 17 were highlighted in yellow, and he'd written something in the margin in his messy handwriting. Just 2 words, be ready. My hands started shaking then, because I knew. I didn't want to know, but I knew. I've been a Christian my whole adult life. Was a pastor for almost a decade before I couldn't do it anymore, and I've read these passages 100 times. For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a cry of command, with the voice of an archangel, and with the sound of the trumpet of God. And the dead in Christ will rise first. Then we who are alive, who are left, will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. I sat down in Caleb's chair because my legs weren't working right anymore. The station phone started ringing. Not just ringing, but all 3 lines lighting up at once. I should answer it, I thought. I should say something on air. I should do something other than sit here staring at this empty chair. But I couldn't move for maybe a full minute. I just sat there listening to the phones ring and ring, and somewhere in my head, a voice was saying, this isn't real. This can't be real. There's got to be another explanation. But there wasn't. You know how you just know things sometimes? How your gut tells you the truth before your brain catches up? That's what was happening. I picked up the phone finally, line 1, and this woman's voice came through, high and panicked. She said, please tell me you're still there. Please tell me someone's still there. I told her I was here. I was still here, and she started crying. She said her husband was gone, her 2 kids were gone, and she was alone in their house in Great Falls, and she didn't understand what was happening. I didn't know what to tell her. What do you say to that? So I just listened to her cry for a bit, and then I told her to stay on the line. I'd be right back. I went to the window. Our station sits on a hill overlooking Ironwood Springs, and you can see most of the town from up here. Population 2,400, give or take. Little Main Street with a diner, a hardware store, a church on each end of town, houses spreading out from there into the hills. I've lived here for 6 years, and I know this view like my own face. But something was wrong with it now. There were car lights on the highway, stopped at strange angles. I could see lights on in houses where they shouldn't be. People moving around at 2 in the morning when everyone should be asleep. And there was this sound, faint but definitely there, of car alarms and what might have been someone shouting. The phone lines were all lit up again immediately. I started taking calls. Every single one was the same story with different details. A man from Billings said his wife and daughter were gone. A college kid from Missoula said his roommate had vanished. A nurse from Helena said half her patients had disappeared and the hospital was in chaos. An elderly woman from Butte said her prayer group of 6 had been meeting on video call and 4 of them just weren't there anymore. Their screens showing empty rooms. Each person asked me the same thing. What's happening? Where did they go? And each time I had to tell them I didn't know for sure, but I had an idea, and they needed to think about what that idea meant. Between calls, I tried Caleb's cell phone. It rang and rang, then went to voicemail. I tried my sister in Portland. No answer. Tried my old mentor from seminary in Denver. No answer. I tried the Montana Highway Patrol. Got a busy signal. Tried 911, got a recording saying all circuits were busy. I tried other radio stations, scanning through frequencies, and found mostly dead air. A few automated emergency broadcasts saying to stay calm and stay home. One station out of Spokane was still running, and the DJ there sounded as lost as I felt, taking calls from panicked listeners and not having any answers to give them. I should tell you about myself before I go any further. My name is Michael Carter. I'm 48 years old, and I thought I knew God pretty well. I was raised atheist, came to faith at 32 after my future wife Elizabeth dragged me to a church service one Sunday morning. I fought it for months, but something about the message got through to me, and I couldn't shake it. Got baptized that Christmas, felt called to ministry by spring, went to seminary, and was ordained at 35. Pastored a small church outside of Bozeman for 9 years. Elizabeth and we were good together. She was the real believer, the one with the unshakable faith that could move mountains. I was the one who intellectualized everything, who needed to understand and explain and have it all make sense. She got sick 4 years ago. Ovarian cancer stage 4 by the time they found it. I prayed like I'd never prayed before. Believed God would heal her because that's what God does, right? That's what we preach. Have faith and mountains will move. But she died anyway on a Tuesday morning in February, holding my hand and telling me it was going to be okay. I didn't handle it well. I kept preaching for another 6 months, but my heart wasn't in it anymore. I was angry at God in a way I couldn't admit to anyone, especially not my congregation. So I resigned, told everyone I needed time to heal, and took this radio job because it was easy and it was lonely, and I could hide up here in the mountains and not have to face anyone. That was 4 years ago, and I've been coasting ever since, going through the motions, playing Christian music, reading Bible verses on air, taking prayer requests, but not really believing any of it the way I used to. Not the way Elizabeth believed it. And now, sitting here at 2:47 in the morning with my producer gone and the world falling apart, I'm wondering if that's why I'm still here. If that's why Caleb got to go and I didn't. Because my faith was real once, but somewhere along the way, it became just words I said out loud without meaning them down deep where it counts. Another call came through. This one was from a man named John Harris, trucker hauling freight from Seattle to Minneapolis. He said he'd been driving through Idaho when every single car in front of him just veered off the road at once. 7 or 8 vehicles he counted, all at the same time. He managed to stop without hitting anyone, and when he got out to check on people, there was nobody in the cars. Engines still running, headlights on, doors closed, but no drivers. He checked every single vehicle. Some of them had phones still on the seat, purses, wallets, everything you'd expect, but no people. He said he'd been driving for 6 hours since then, and he'd seen maybe 30 crashes, every one the same. Cars with nobody in them, trucks jackknifed across highways, and the thing that got to him most, he said, was the silence. Usually you crash on a highway, there's sirens within minutes, but there was nothing. No police, no ambulances, nobody coming to help. I asked him about the radio in his truck, what he was hearing. He said mostly emergency broadcasts, lots of static, and then he found my station. He said he'd been a believer his whole life, raised Baptist, taught Sunday school for 15 years, and he couldn't understand why he was still here. His voice broke when he said it, and I didn't have an answer for him. I just told him to find somewhere safe to park, somewhere with other people, and to keep his radio on. I told him we'd get through this together, even though I didn't believe it when I said it. The sun's gonna come up in a few hours, and I think that's when this is really going to hit. When people wake up and realize how many are gone, when businesses try to open and half their staff doesn't show up, when families gather and count the empty chairs. I'm gonna stay here at the station. I've got enough food and water for a few days, a generator in the back for when the power goes out, and this microphone. As long as I can broadcast, I will. Because maybe that's why I'm still here. Not because my faith was too weak to save me, but because someone needs to tell this story. Someone needs to be a voice in the dark for all of us who got left behind. The sun came up on that first morning, and I watched it from the station window like I was seeing it for the first time. Everything looked normal out there, you know? The mountains were still purple in the early light, the pine trees were still standing, the sky was still that particular shade of blue we get up here. But Ironwood Springs was different. I could see smoke rising from at least 3 different places in town, and when I looked at the highway through the binoculars we keep for weather spotting, there were abandoned vehicles everywhere. Some of them had been pushed to the side, which meant people were still moving around, still trying to make things work. I didn't leave the station that first day. Couldn't bring myself to do it. I just kept taking calls and playing music and reading scripture. And the whole time, I was hoping this was some kind of nightmare I'd wake up from. But I didn't wake up, and the calls kept coming. Matthew Green was one of the early ones, maybe around 7 in the morning. He's a long-haul trucker, been driving for 20 years, and he called in from somewhere outside of Spokane. Said he'd been on the road when it happened, saw the same thing John Harris saw, cars going off the road all at once. But Matthew told me something else that stuck with me. He said he'd stopped at a truck stop just after dawn, and there were maybe 20 drivers there, all standing around in the parking lot like they didn't know what to do with themselves. Nobody was talking much, he said, just standing there, drinking coffee and staring at their phones. He told me about this one driver, younger guy, who kept saying his wife was gone and his kids were gone, and he didn't know whether to keep driving or go home. And And Matthew, he said he didn't know what to tell the guy, because what do you say to that? So they all just stood there together, and eventually people started leaving, one by one, heading back to wherever they came from. Matthew said he was going to try to make it to his place in Idaho, see if his ex-wife was still there, check on his daughter. I told him to be careful, to watch for crashes and fires, and to call back when he could. He said he would, and I believed him. That first morning, I tried to make a list of who was gone and who was still here, at least from the calls I was getting. It wasn't scientific or anything, just me trying to understand the pattern. Children seemed to be gone, almost all of them. Anyone under maybe 12 or 13 from what people were telling me. But not all teenagers. Some were gone, some weren't. Adults were split too, no clear pattern based on age or where they lived or anything like that. The only thing that seemed to matter was faith, real faith, the kind that goes bone deep. And that's what scared me, because I'd thought my faith was real. I'd preached it, I'd lived it, I'd built my whole life around it, but apparently it wasn't enough. I finally left the station on the afternoon of day 2. We were running low on water, and I needed to see the town up close, needed to know what we were dealing with. I took the station truck, drove down the hill into Ironwood Springs, and it was like driving through a ghost town. Main Street was empty, except for a few people wandering around looking lost. The diner was closed, windows dark. The hardware store had its door standing open, and I could see merchandise scattered on the floor like someone had been looking for something specific. The church on the north end, the Baptist one, had people gathered outside, maybe 15 or 20 folks just standing on the lawn. I almost stopped, but I didn't. Wasn't ready to face other people yet, to see that same lost look I knew was on my face reflected back at me. I went to the grocery store, and that's where I ran into Jonathan Reed. He's the town sheriff, been in that job for maybe 8 years. Good man. The kind who knows everyone's name and actually cares about the community. He was standing by his patrol car in the parking lot, and when I pulled up, he just looked at me like he was seeing someone back from the dead. We stood there for a minute, neither of us knowing what to say, and then he asked me if I was okay. I almost laughed at that. Asked him if he was okay. He said no, he wasn't, and then he told me about his daughter. Her name was Emma, and she was 7 years old. Was 7 years old, he corrected himself. Past tense now. She'd been staying with her mother, Jonathan's ex-wife, when it happened. He'd gotten the call from his ex at 2:30 in the morning, hysterical, saying Emma was gone. Just gone from her bed, blanket still warm, stuffed rabbit still on the pillow. Jonathan had driven over there, searched the house, searched the yard, called in every deputy he had, but she was gone, and somewhere around dawn, he'd stopped searching because he knew. His ex-wife was gone too, he told me. Found her car at the church parking lot later that morning, keys still in the ignition. So Emma was somewhere with her mother now, wherever that was, and he was here alone trying to figure out how to keep doing his job when nothing made sense anymore. I didn't know what to say to him. Still don't, really. So I just stood there with him in that parking lot while the sun beat down on us, and eventually he asked me about the station, asked if I was going to keep broadcasting. I told him I was, long as I could. He nodded like that made sense, and then he said something that's been rattling around in my head ever since. He said, I thought I was doing everything right, you know? Took her to church every Sunday I had her. Taught her to pray, read her Bible stories at bedtime. I thought that was enough. And I told him I thought I'd been doing everything right too, but apparently we were both wrong about something. The grocery store was a mess. Some aisles had been cleared out completely. Others were untouched. No one was working there. No cashiers, no managers, so people were just taking what they needed and leaving money on the counter. That's how it was those first few days. People trying to maintain some kind of order even though the system had collapsed. I grabbed what I could carry, left some cash, and loaded up the truck. Jonathan helped me, and we didn't talk much. Back at the station, I got a call from a woman named Sarah Mitchell. She was calling from Portland, and she said she'd been listening to my broadcast since that first night. Her voice was calm, steadier than most of the calls I'd been getting, and she told me she'd been left behind too. She'd been a Christian her whole life, grew up in the church, taught Sunday school, led worship, did all the things you're supposed to do. But she said she'd been going through the motions for years, saying the right words, but not feeling them anymore. She'd lost her husband 3 years ago, and after that, church just felt empty. She kept going because it was habit, because people expected it, but her heart wasn't in it. And now here she was, alone in her apartment with her 2 cats, listening to some radio preacher in Montana trying to make sense of the end of the world. I told her I wasn't a preacher anymore, and she laughed at that, said I sounded like a preacher to her. Then she asked me something nobody else had asked yet. She said, "Do you think we still have a chance?" And I had to think about that for a long minute before I answered. I told her I'd been reading Revelation, really reading it for the first time in years, and from what I could see, yes, we still had a chance. This wasn't the end, not yet. This was the beginning of the tribulation, the 7 years of testing and judgment, and there was still time for redemption, still time to get it right. She was quiet for a bit, and then she said she'd been thinking the same thing. Said she'd been praying more in the last 3 days than she had in the last 3 years, and for the first time in a long time, it felt real. Sarah told me she was gathering people, anyone who'd been left behind and wanted to understand what was happening, meeting in her apartment, reading scripture together, trying to prepare for whatever came next. She said if I heard from anyone in the Portland area, anyone who needed community, to send them her way. I wrote down her number and promised I would. After we hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt since that first night. Hope, maybe. Or at least the possibility of hope. The idea that being left behind didn't mean we were abandoned. Maybe it meant we had work to do. Day 4, I got a call from Isaac Walker. He was trapped in an office building in Seattle, high-rise, 23rd floor. Said the power had gone out on day 1, and the elevators weren't working. He'd been working late when it happened, his whole team just gone in an instant, and he'd been too scared to try the stairs in the dark. He'd been surviving on vending machine food and water from the bathroom sink, and he was calling because his phone was almost dead, and he wanted someone to know he was there. I talked him through it, told him to use his phone's flashlight sparingly, to count the floors as he went down, to take it slow. He was quiet for a minute, and then he said he was afraid. Not of the stairs, not of the dark, but of what he'd find when he got outside. Afraid of being alone in a city of millions with nobody left. I told him he wouldn't be alone, that there were others, that he needed to find them. Day 7 was Sunday, and I did something I hadn't done in years. I preached. Not a full sermon, just a short message about where we were and what it meant. I talked about the parable of the 10 virgins from Matthew 25, the 5 wise and the 5 foolish, and how they all fell asleep waiting for the bridegroom. But when he came, only the ones who'd kept their lamps filled with oil were ready. The others were left outside, knocking on the door, and the bridegroom said he didn't know them. I told my listeners that we were the ones left knocking, and that was a hard truth to face. But the door wasn't locked forever. There was still time to fill our lamps, still time to become the people we'd claimed to be all along. I read from 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 9. The Lord is not slow to fulfill his promise, as some count slowness, but is patient toward you, not wishing that any should perish, but that all should reach repentance. After the broadcast, I sat in the quiet studio and thought about Elizabeth. She would have been taken, I knew that without question. Her faith was the real thing, unshakable and pure. She used to tell me that faith wasn't about understanding, it was about trusting even when you didn't understand. I'd always nodded and agreed, but I never really got it. I wanted explanations, wanted everything to make logical sense, wanted to be able to defend my faith with arguments and evidence. But faith doesn't work like that. It's not a math problem you solve, it's a relationship you live. And I'd let that relationship die when Elizabeth died, blamed God for taking her, and spent 4 years pretending I was still a believer when really I was just angry and going through motions. That's what I'm doing now, here on the radio. I'm trying to rebuild that relationship, trying to mean it again. And maybe that's the real reason I'm still here, the real purpose of all this. Not just to document what's happening or to give people information, but to work out my own salvation with fear and trembling, like Paul said, to figure out how to believe again when everything I thought I knew has been torn apart. These first 7 days have been hell. Not going to sugarcoat that, but they've also been clarifying in a way I didn't expect. I know where I stand now, I know what I lost and why I lost it, and I've got time, however much time is left, to find it again. This is Michael Carter, and it's the end of day 7. If you're still listening, thank you. We'll get through this together. It's been 3 months now, and I'm not alone anymore. James Whitmore showed up at the station about 6 weeks ago, hitchhiked all the way from Bozeman with a backpack full of books and not much else. He's 24, was studying at a seminary there when it happened, and he said he'd been listening to my broadcast since the first night. Said he figured I could use some help, and honestly, he was right. I was running myself into the ground trying to maintain a 24-hour broadcast schedule alone. Now we trade off 6-hour shifts each, and it's made all the difference. Not just the practical help, but having someone to talk to, someone to pray with, someone who's wrestling with the same questions I am. James is sharp, knows his scripture better than I do at this point, and he's got this way of seeing connections I miss. He's the one who started tracking what we're seeing against the book of Revelation, specifically the 7 seals from chapter 6. He's got a notebook now, pages and pages of observations and Bible verses and news reports, and when you look at it all together, the pattern becomes pretty clear. We're not just in the tribulation. We're watching it unfold exactly like it was written 2,000 years ago, and that's both terrifying and somehow comforting at the same time. At least we know what's coming, even if we can't stop it. The first seal, James says, was opened right at the beginning. A rider on a white horse going out conquering and to conquer. We didn't recognize it at first, but about 2 weeks after the disappearances, this guy started showing up on every news channel. David Whitaker, Used to be some kind of diplomat at the United Nations, nobody anyone had really heard of before. But suddenly he's everywhere, giving speeches about unity and peace and rebuilding. He's got this way of talking that makes you want to believe him, makes you think maybe everything's going to be okay, and people are listening. Countries are listening. Within a month, he'd brokered some kind of agreement between nations that have been enemies for decades. Within 2 months, he's heading up this new global council that's supposed to coordinate recovery efforts. It happened so fast that if you weren't watching for it, you'd miss how strange it all is. James and I, we watch his speeches when we can get the satellite feed working. There's something off about Whitaker, something we can't quite put our finger on. He says all the right things, talks about hope and cooperation and building a better world from the ashes of the old one. But his eyes are cold. That's what gets me. His eyes don't match his words. And the way people respond to him, it's almost like they're under a spell. They're not just agreeing with him, they're devoted to him. I've seen that kind of devotion before in churches, in cult documentaries, and it never ends well. The second seal brought war, just like the book said it would. Red horse, rider with a great sword, taking peace from the earth. It started small, regional conflicts flaring up in places that were already unstable. But then it spread. India and Pakistan fighting over Kashmir again, but worse this time. Civil war breaking out in 3 different African nations. Russia moving troops into Eastern Europe. China making moves in the South China Sea. He brokers ceasefires that last maybe a week before the fighting starts again. It's like the violence has its own momentum now, can't be stopped no matter what anyone tries. We got a call about a month ago from a man named Aaron Hughes, farmer down in Wyoming. He said something was wrong with his land. He's been farming the same plot for 30 years, knows every inch of it, knows exactly what it needs and when it needs it. But his crops were failing. Not from drought or disease or anything he could identify, just failing. Wheat coming up stunted and brown, corn that wouldn't grow past knee height, soil that looked fine but wouldn't produce. And it wasn't just him, he said. Every farmer he knew was dealing with the same thing. The third seal, James told me after we hung up. Black horse, scales in hand, a quart of wheat for a day's wages. Famine. Not yet, not full scale, but coming. You can feel it coming. Aaron called back 2 weeks later, and his voice was different. Defeated. He said he'd had to shoot 3 of his horses because they'd gone crazy, tried to break out of the barn and hurt themselves. His dogs wouldn't come near him anymore, just stood at a distance and whined. Birds weren't singing like they used to. Everything felt wrong, he said, like the earth itself was sick. I told him about Romans chapter 8, how creation waits in eager expectation, groaning in labor pains. He was quiet for a long time, and then he said he'd been going to church his whole life and never really understood what that meant until now. Now he could feel it, that groaning. Said it was in the ground under his feet, in the air he breathed. The pale horse came next, and with it death and Hades following close behind. That's when the plague started. Nobody knows where it came from. Just showed up simultaneously in a dozen major cities. Flu-like symptoms at first, then it gets worse fast. Fever, bleeding, organ failure, kills within a week. We got a call from Daniel Price, doctor working in Boise, trying to deal with an outbreak there. He said nothing they tried worked. Antibiotics, antivirals, nothing touched it. And the strangest part, he said, was that it seemed to pick and choose. Some people got it, some didn't. No clear pattern based on exposure or health or anything medical science could explain. He'd seen entire families wiped out while their neighbors stayed healthy, seen hospital workers drop dead while others worked right alongside them without catching it. Daniel called back a few more times over the next month, and each time he sounded more exhausted, more broken. The last time I heard from him, he said the hospital was running out of body bags. Said he'd stopped trying to save people and was just trying to make them comfortable while they died. He told me he'd been an atheist before all this, believed in science and reason and nothing else. But he couldn't explain what he was seeing with science. Couldn't make it make sense in any framework except the one he'd always rejected. He asked me how to pray, and I walked him through it right there on the air. Sarah Mitchell called again, said her group in Portland had grown to about 50 people meeting in secret. Secret because things were getting dangerous for anyone who talked openly about what was really happening. Whitaker's people were everywhere now, she said, and they didn't like dissent. Didn't like anyone questioning the official narrative that everything was under control and getting better. She said there'd been arrests, people disappearing for posting the wrong things online or saying the wrong things in public. Not concentration camps or anything that obvious, just people being picked up for disturbing the peace or spreading misinformation. And once they were picked up, their families didn't hear from them again. She told me about a man in her group named Benjamin Cole. He'd been a megachurch pastor before, one of those prosperity gospel guys with a big building and a bigger ego. He'd been left behind and it destroyed him. He spent the first month drunk, she said, just completely falling apart because he couldn't understand why. He'd built a church of 5,000 people, had been on television, had led thousands to Christ, or so he thought. But apparently none of it counted for anything when it mattered. Sarah said he finally showed up at one of their meetings about a month ago, sober and broken and ready to be honest for the first time in his life. He told everyone how he'd preached a false gospel, how he'd told people God wanted them to be rich and comfortable when really God wanted them to be faithful and obedient, how he'd built his whole ministry on lies because the lies were more popular than the truth. Benjamin's been traveling around now, Sarah said, going to the remnants of churches and telling his story, warning people not to make the same mistakes. It's dangerous work. Whitaker's coalition has been consolidating religious institutions, bringing them all under one umbrella, preaching unity and tolerance, and a dozen other words that sound good but mean nothing. Any church that resists gets labeled as extremist, divisive, dangerous. Benjamin doesn't care. He figures he's got nothing left to lose, and if he's going down, he might as well go down telling the truth for once. I've been thinking a lot about my own ministry, about the years I spent in that pulpit in Bozeman. Was I any better than Benjamin? I didn't preach prosperity gospel, but I preached comfort. Preached a God who was safe and predictable and always on our side. Preached grace without repentance, faith without sacrifice, heaven without hell. Made Christianity into something easy and acceptable, something that didn't cost anything or require anything except showing up on Sunday morning and being generally decent to your neighbors. And maybe that's why I'm here instead of there. Because I taught people a version of faith that couldn't save them when it mattered. James and I have started doing something different with the broadcast. We're not just taking calls and playing music anymore. We're teaching, really teaching. going through scripture verse by verse and showing people how it connects to what we're seeing. We're talking about the seals and the trumpets and the bowls of wrath that are still coming. We're warning people about the mark because we can see it coming, even if it's not here yet. Whitaker's already talking about a new economic system, a way to track and distribute resources fairly in a world that's falling apart. Sounds reasonable, sounds necessary even. But James and I both know what it really is. We know what it will require. And we're trying to prepare people to say no when the time comes, no matter what it costs them. The earthquakes started about a week ago. Not big ones, not yet, but constant. Little tremors that rattle the windows and make you wonder when the big one's coming. James showed me the verse, said this was the sixth seal. There was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth. The full moon became like blood, and the stars of the sky fell to the earth. We haven't seen the cosmic signs yet, but the ground is definitely shaking. And people are afraid in a way they weren't before. A primal kind of fear that goes deeper than logic. They can feel it building, whatever's coming next. I'm not the man I was 3 months ago. I can feel myself changing, becoming someone different. Someone harder maybe, but also more honest, more real. I'm not hiding behind theology or intellectual arguments anymore. I'm just a man trying to survive the end of the world and help as many people as I can do the same. James says that's what we're here for. Those of us who were left behind. We're witnesses. We're warnings. We're last chances for people who haven't made their choice yet. And if we can help even one person understand what's happening and choose right, then maybe it was worth it. Maybe being left behind wasn't a rejection, but a commission. Maybe we're exactly where we're supposed to be, doing exactly what we're supposed to do. This is Michael Carter, 3 months into the tribulation, and I'm still here, still broadcasting, still believing that somehow, against all odds, we're gonna make it through this, or at least die trying. "10 months in, and the world has found a new normal." That's the scary part, really. How quickly people adapt, how quickly the unthinkable becomes routine. Whitaker's coalition runs most of the functioning governments now, and I've got to admit they've done what they promised. The power grid is mostly stable again. Supply chains are working, at least in the major cities. There's food in stores, medicine in hospitals, order in the streets. Things are better than they were 6 months ago, and people are grateful for it. They're so grateful, they're not asking the right questions about what it's costing them. James and I aren't broadcasting from the station anymore. We move every few days, set up in abandoned buildings or houses anywhere with power and an internet connection. We've got portable equipment now, solar panels, batteries, a whole setup we can pack into the back of a truck in under an hour. We've had to run twice already, gotten tips that Whitaker's security forces were coming. They call themselves the Unity Enforcement Division, but we just call them the UED. They're going after anyone spreading what they call dangerous misinformation, which means anyone telling the truth about what's really happening. We're high on their list, apparently. A voice in the darkness telling people to resist. Can't have that in the New World Order. The mark rolled out 2 months ago. They didn't call it that, of course. Called it the Universal Resource Chip, the URC. Whitaker gave this beautiful speech about how we were entering a new era of human cooperation, how we needed a system that was fair and transparent and accessible to everyone. The chip would handle all transactions, he said. No more cash, no more credit cards, no more inequality in access to resources. Just a small injection in your right hand or forehead, quantum encrypted, impossible to forge or steal. And the best part, he said with that smile that never reaches his eyes, was that it would monitor health metrics too. Catch diseases before they became pandemics. Save millions of lives. Who could argue with that? I knew what it was the moment he announced it. James knew too. We went on air that night and read from Revelation chapter 13. It causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark. We told people not to take it, no matter what. We explained that this wasn't about convenience or safety. This was about allegiance. This was about choosing sides in a war most people still didn't realize they were fighting. And we warned them what would happen if they took it. Not just the earthly consequences, but the eternal ones. If anyone worships the beast and its image and receives a mark on his forehead or on his hand, he also will drink the wine of God's wrath. The response was mixed. Some people listened. Sarah Mitchell called from Portland, said her whole group had committed to refusing the chip no matter what. But others, they called us crazy, called us fearmongers, said we were making things worse, preventing people from accessing the help they needed. And the worst calls were from believers, people who'd been Christians before all this, who'd been left behind like us, who were now trying to convince themselves that maybe the chip was okay, maybe it wasn't the mark, maybe we were interpreting scripture wrong. Maybe God would understand if they took it just to survive. James's mother got sick about 6 weeks ago. Cancer, advanced stage. He got the call from a hospital in Missoula, and we drove down there together. I stayed in the truck while he went in, and when he came back 2 hours later, his face was gray. They told him she had maybe 3 months without treatment, he said. They could start chemotherapy immediately, had a bed ready for her, but she'd need the chip first. Hospital policy, they said. All patients required to have the URC for billing and medication tracking purposes. No exceptions. And his mother, she was begging him to agree to it, didn't understand why he was hesitating, didn't see what the big deal was. Just get the stupid chip, she kept saying. It's just a piece of technology. It doesn't mean anything. He told her no. I watched him tell his mother he wasn't going to let her take the mark, and I watched her face change from confusion to anger to something worse. Betrayal. Like he was choosing to let her die. Maybe he was, from her perspective. He tried to explain, tried to show her the scriptures on his phone, but she wouldn't listen. Told him to leave, told him she never wanted to see him again, called him a fanatic and worse things. The nurses escorted him out, and we drove back to our current location in silence. He didn't cry until we were inside with the door locked. Then he broke down completely, and I held him while he sobbed, and there was nothing I could say that would make it better, because sometimes there isn't anything to say. His mother died 3 weeks later. She took the chip first. We found out through an obituary James saw online. Died in the hospital with the best care available, surrounded by staff who were following protocols perfectly. The cancer just moved too fast, the obituary said, but James and I both knew the truth. The chip didn't save her. Nothing could save her once she took it. He hasn't been the same since. Still broadcasts with me, still does the work, but something broke in him that day. Maybe something needed to break. Maybe we all have to lose everything before we can really understand what any of this means. I got a call last week from Jonathan Reed. Hadn't heard from him in months, thought maybe he'd made it through somehow, kept his integrity intact. But when he spoke, I knew before he said anything. His voice was different, flat, dead. He told me he'd taken the chip 2 weeks ago. His sister had been in a car accident, needed surgery, and they wouldn't operate without proof of insurance and identity verification through the URC system. He could have let her die, he said. That would have been the righteous thing to do, right? That's what we've been preaching. But when it came down to it, when he was standing in that emergency room and they were telling him she had minutes, not hours, he couldn't do it. He got the chip, signed the paperwork, and they saved her life. He told me he knew what he'd done, knew what it meant. Said he'd been reading Revelation every night since, reading the passages about those who take the mark, and he understood. There was no going back from this, no forgiveness for this particular sin. He'd traded eternity for his sister's life, made his choice, and now he was calling to say goodbye. Wanted me to know so I wouldn't wonder what happened to him. Wanted me to tell his story on air as a warning to others. Don't do what I did, he said. Don't think you can compromise just once. Don't think God will make an exception for you. The rules are the rules, and they're written in blood. Then he hung up, and I sat there staring at the phone, and I wanted to throw up. We put his story on air the next night, and the backlash was immediate. People saying we were heartless, saying Jonathan was a hero for saving his sister, saying God wouldn't punish someone for an act of love. But that's the thing about the tribulation. It's not about what seems fair or loving or reasonable. It's about obedience when obedience costs you everything. It's about faith when faith means watching people you love suffer and die. Abraham was willing to sacrifice Isaac. Job lost everything and still wouldn't curse God. The martyrs died singing hymns. And we're being asked to do the same thing, to choose between earthly comfort and eternal salvation. And most people are failing that test. There's a man who's been helping us, feeding us information about the UED and their operations. His name is Nathaniel Scott, former FBI agent who figured out what Whitaker really was about 6 months ago. He's been on the run ever since, moving through an underground network of resistors, gathering intelligence, passing it to people like us who can get the word out. He contacted us through a coded message on the broadcast about 2 months back, and we've been working with him ever since. He's the one who warned us about the raids, the one who's kept us one step ahead of arrest. Nathaniel told us something last week that's kept me up at night. He said he's got a source inside Whitaker's inner circle, someone high up who's seen the plans for what comes next. The chip isn't the end goal, Nathaniel said. It's the foundation. They're building towards something bigger, something that will make refusing the mark nearly impossible. There's going to be a religious component, he said. Whitaker's going to declare himself divine, going to demand worship, not just allegiance. And anyone without the chip won't just be excluded from the economy. They'll be hunted, systematically. There's a list being compiled right now, names and locations of known resistors. Our names are on it. High priority targets. We've got maybe a month before things get really bad, Nathaniel thinks. Maybe less. He's trying to organize some kind of underground railroad, safe houses where people can hide, but it's risky. Every day more people take the chip, and every person who takes it becomes a potential informant. The thing about the chip, Nathaniel said, is that it changes people. Not obviously, not all at once, but gradually. They become more compliant, less questioning, more devoted to Whitaker. It's like it does something to their will, their ability to think independently. His source thinks there's a spiritual component to it, something beyond the technology. Once you take it, you belong to the system, to the beast. Lucas Bryant called yesterday. He's one of the engineers who worked on the URC, helped design the infrastructure. He disappeared from his job about a month after the rollout, went into hiding when he realized what he'd helped create. He wanted to confess on air, wanted people to hear from someone who'd been inside the project. He told us the chip does exactly what Nathaniel's source said. There's a component that interfaces with the brain, subtle but real. It regulates dopamine, influences decision-making, creates a sense of connection to the network. People who take it feel good about Whitaker, feel positive about the system, feel like they belong to something bigger than themselves. And the more people in the network, the stronger the effect becomes. It's brilliant and evil in equal measure, Lucas said. We built a cage that people walk into willingly and then lock from the inside. I asked him why he helped build it. He said he didn't know it was a cage at first, thought he was building something good, something that would help humanity recover. But as the project went on, as he saw what the chip really did, he tried to raise concerns. Was told to keep quiet or face termination. He kept quiet for 2 months, and then he couldn't anymore. Grabbed what documentation he could and ran. He's been trying to get the information out ever since, but nobody wants to listen. People don't want to hear that the thing that's making their lives better is also destroying their souls. This is the reality 10 months in. The world is divided into 2 groups now, those who've taken the mark and those who haven't. And that second group is getting smaller every day. Hunger does that, fear does that, watching your children suffer does that. It's easy to preach resistance when you've got food in your stomach and a roof over your head. Harder when you're choosing between the mark and watching your family starve. I don't judge Jonathan for what he did. I don't judge anyone for breaking under this kind of pressure. I just pray I'll be stronger when my turn comes, because it's coming. For all of us, the choice is coming, and we won't get to make it on our terms. We'll make it when we're desperate and broken and out of options, and that's when we'll find out what our faith is really worth. This is Michael Carter, still unmarked, still broadcasting, still hoping somehow we can hold out long enough to see this through to the end. Three and a half years. That's how long it's been since that night at the station when Caleb disappeared and the world changed forever. I'm broadcasting from a bunker now, built by a man named John Harris who saw this coming decades ago. He was one of those survivalist types everyone used to laugh at, stockpiling food and ammunition and building shelters in the Montana wilderness. Turns out he wasn't crazy after all. He found God 2 years ago, right here in this bunker, listening to our broadcast. Showed up at one of our locations 6 months back and offered us sanctuary. Said he'd built this place for the end times, and here we were. Might as well use it for something that mattered. John's dead now. UED raid 3 weeks ago. They found his property, didn't find the bunker, but they found him. He led them away from us, fired shots to draw them in the opposite direction, and they killed him for it. We heard it happen over the radio he carried, heard the gunfire, heard the silence after. We've got maybe a week before they realize there's more to his property than what they found. Maybe less. So this might be my last broadcast, and I want to make it count. Want to tell you everything I've seen, everything I've learned, everything I wish I'd understood 3.5 years ago when I still had time to get it right the first time. James is gone too. They took him 8 months ago in Spokane. We'd gone there to meet with a group of believers, about 30 people meeting in secret. Someone informed on us, someone who'd taken the mark and didn't even know they were betraying us. That's how it works now. The chip makes you loyal without you realizing it. We were halfway through the meeting when the UED came through the doors. James told me to run, physically shoved me toward the back exit while he stayed behind. I ran like a coward, and I've had to live with that every day since. They executed him 2 days later. Public broadcast made an example of him. Said he was a terrorist, a threat to the new order, someone spreading dangerous lies. I watched it happen on a screen, watched my friend die, and I couldn't do anything but keep broadcasting, keep telling his story, keep making sure his death meant something. Sarah Mitchell is still out there. I got a message from her last month through Nathaniel's network. Her group in Portland has grown to over 200 people, all unmarked, all committed to resisting to the end. They're doing what the early church did, meeting in homes, sharing resources, preparing for martyrdom. She said they're not afraid anymore. Fear was for the beginning, she said. Now they're just ready. Ready for whatever comes. Ready to die, if that's what it takes. She asked me to pray for them, and I do. Every night I pray for Sarah and her people, and for all the others scattered across the world who are still holding on. Matthew Green, the trucker who called in that first morning, he made it almost 2 years. Kept driving, kept moving, kept calling in with reports from different cities. He saw things most people didn't see, being on the roads constantly. Saw the camps where they take unmarked people. Saw the mass graves outside of Denver. Saw the churches that had become temples to Whitaker, his image on every wall. His last call came from somewhere in Nebraska. Said he was out of fuel, out of food, out of road. Said he'd had a good run, but it was over. He thanked me for keeping the broadcast going. Said it had kept him sane when everything else was insane. Then he said he was going to read Psalm 23 and wait for whatever came next. I never heard from him again. Isaac Walker made it out of that building in Seattle. Called me about a year ago to tell me the story. Said he'd gotten down the stairs in the dark, gotten outside, and found others. A community of unmarked people living in the ruins of the city, scavenging and surviving. He'd stayed with them for 18 months, but then the UED started sweeping the cities systematically. He escaped east, made it to Montana, found a group hiding in the mountains. He's still there as far as I know. One of thousands trying to wait this out in the wilderness, living off the land like refugees in their own country. Aaron Hughes, the farmer from Wyoming, he held out longer than most. Kept working his land even when nothing would grow right. Kept trying because that's what farmers do. But eventually the system caught up with him. Can't buy seed without the chip. Can't sell crops without the chip. Can't get fuel for the tractor without the chip. He had a choice between starving slowly or taking the mark. He chose starvation. His wife called me 2 months ago to tell me he'd passed. Said he died praying, died believing he'd made the right choice. She's still there on the farm, still unmarked, still waiting. I don't know how she's surviving. Maybe she's not anymore. Daniel Price, the doctor from Boise, he's gone too. The plague took him about a year ago. Ironic, really. He spent months treating it, watching it kill thousands, and then it killed him. But before he died, he called me one last time, said he'd made his peace with God, said he understood now what he'd been missing his whole life. That faith wasn't about having answers, it was about trusting when you didn't have answers. He died in an empty hospital, alone, but he died believing. I need to tell you about what's happened with Whitaker, because that's the thing everyone needs to understand. 6 months ago, he declared himself divine. Not in those exact words, but close enough. Said he'd received a revelation, a direct communication from the universal consciousness or whatever New Age garbage he was selling that week. Said he was the bridge between humanity and the next stage of evolution. Started demanding not just obedience, but worship. Built temples in every major city, mandatory attendance for anyone with the chip. And the thing is, people went willingly. People with the mark, they don't question it anymore. They worship him with genuine devotion, like he really is God. The signs in the sky started about 3 months ago. I've seen them myself, not just heard reports. The sun turned dark for 6 hours in the middle of the day, like something was blocking it. The moon turned red, blood red, exactly like Revelation said it would. Stars falling from the sky, meteors probably, but more than I've ever seen in my life. Constant every night, like the universe itself is coming apart. And earthquakes, massive ones. California is mostly underwater now. Japan is gone. Islands all over the Pacific disappeared in a series of quakes and tsunamis that killed millions. The earth is destroying itself, and everyone with the mark thinks it's natural disasters. But those of us who are left, we know what it really is. Judgment. Nathaniel Scott got captured 2 weeks ago. I know because they broadcast his interrogation. Tried to get him to reveal where the resistance networks were, who was helping unmarked people hide. He didn't break. They tortured him for 3 days, and he didn't break. Just kept quoting scripture at them, kept telling them they were on the wrong side, kept warning them what was coming. They executed him on the 4th day. Another name on a list that gets longer every day. Benjamin Cole, the former megachurch pastor who spent his last years trying to undo the damage he'd done. Hannah Reynolds and Rebecca Hayes, the women from Sarah's group who were caught running supplies to hidden believers. Lucas Bryant, the engineer who tried to expose what the chip really did. All dead now. I want to tell you about Elizabeth one more time. My wife, the woman whose death broke me and started me down the path that led here. I've had 3.5 years to think about what she meant, what she taught me, what I failed to learn when I had the chance. She used to tell me that faith was like a muscle. You had to exercise it, had to use it even when it hurt, or it would atrophy. I let mine atrophy after she died. Let it weaken from disuse, from anger, from doubt, and that's why I got left behind. Not because God was punishing me, but because when the moment came, I wasn't strong enough to be taken. My faith couldn't lift me because I'd let it waste away to nothing. But here's what I've learned in these 3.5 years. Faith can be rebuilt. It's hard work, painful work, but it's possible. I've been exercising that muscle every day since the rapture, strengthening it through practice and prayer and struggle. And I can feel the difference now. I'm not the man I was that night at the station. I'm not the man who blamed God for his wife's death and walked away from his calling. I'm someone new, someone forged in fire, someone who finally understands what Elizabeth tried to teach me all those years ago. Faith isn't about being comfortable or happy or having all the answers. Faith is about holding on when everything tells you to let go. I can hear something outside. Vehicles, maybe. Could be John's neighbors, could be the UED. Doesn't matter much at this point. I've said what I needed to say, told the stories that needed telling. If you're listening to this, if you're still unmarked and still believing, then you know what you have to do. Hold on. Don't take the chip no matter what they promise you. Don't worship the beast no matter how much easier it would make your life. The time is short now. I can feel it ending, feel it all building towards something final and terrible and somehow beautiful at the same time. I'm reading from Revelation chapter 22 now. Let the one who does wrong continue to do wrong. Let the one who is vile continue to be vile. Let the one who does right continue to do right. Let the one who is holy continue to be holy. Look, I am coming soon. My reward is with me, and I will give to each person according to what they have done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, the beginning and the end. The door to the bunker is shaking now. They're here. But I'm not afraid. I should be, but I'm not. I feel peace for the first time since Elizabeth died. Real peace that goes deeper than circumstances. I know where I'm going. Know that whatever happens in the next few minutes, I've made my choice and I'm standing by it. 3.5 years ago, I was left behind because my faith was weak. But I'm not weak anymore. I'm ready now. Finally ready. He who testifies to these things says, surely I am coming soon.